Right, the next fight we have is Jessica Penne versus Lupita Godinez. Now, Lupita Godinez is like a -300 favorite, which you don't see often in women's MMA when they're making a UFC debut, which Godinez is doing. So Godinez is making a UFC debut, but she looks a solid prospect, man. And to be honest, if you have a look here, the stats are, there's a lot of disparity in the stats. So already, if we just look at the age, we can see that Lupita Godinez is 11 years younger than Jessica Penne, right? So that's an 11-year age difference, which is pretty huge. And usually, a lot of the times, it's pretty significant. Now, I will say that in women's MMA, I don't think it's as significant. And if you guys don't know, when I say it's significant, what I mean is that the younger fighter usually wins, okay? Obviously, it's a case-by-case basis. But if you just go on a whole, the younger fighter usually wins in MMA fights. I don't think it's as much in women's MMA, and that was confirmed on Twitter by, one of these, I can't remember exactly his name. It's like MMA AI. I think he's got a bot that does predictions, and he did say that in women's MMA, the age disparity isn't as meaningful as the men's. But anyway, regardless, Jessica Penne is almost 40. And Godinez is not even 30 yet. So that's a huge, I'm not going to say red flag or white flag, but that's a huge flag, something of note. And if we move on to the height, you can see that Jessica Penne now has an advantage as opposed to Godinez on the age, because she has a 3-inch height advantage and a 5-inch reach advantage. So again, if you just check the book Fightnomics, or you go to betmma.tips, and you can actually see that if a fighter has height advantage and a reach advantage, then more often than not, they win, right? So it's beneficial. If a fighter only has a reach advantage and no height advantage, if a fighter only has a height advantage and no reach advantage, it's not actually beneficial, technically on the stats. Over long-term betting, it's not beneficial. Case by case, it can be beneficial. Over the long term, it's not. She's got both here, so her reach should be to her advantage. The thing about that, though, is that in this matchup, she's just not the skillful striker. The skillful striker in this matchup is Lupita Godinez. So I feel like Godinez is probably going to be able to negate that reach disadvantage she has, just because her technique with the boxing is a lot cleaner. And that's what she is. Stylistically, she's a boxer. She does throw some kicks, but really what she wants to do is put them hands on you, hit you with straight shots. She's got good hooks. She's got a good 1-2. She's got a good jab. She'll double jab as well. She's got a very wide range of boxing techniques. On the other hand, Jessica Penne, look, she's only won one fight in her last 5, but she has got the UFC experience here. As I said, Godinez is coming in on a UFC debut. Penne's got decent striking. She's got a couple submissions on her record, so maybe she'll want to test the ground game of Godinez, because I haven't really seen Godinez on bottom before. I have seen her on bottom once. But yeah, not much. I have seen her taken down like once. I believe she got taken down by Vanessa Demopoulos in her last fight for the LFA title. That was late on in the fight there. So, I mean, I think that was in like the 5th round or something. Whereas this is obviously only a 3-round fight. So maybe some fatigue was setting in there. Fighters could obviously get taken down a lot easier in the later rounds than they can in the earlier rounds. They're much stronger in the earlier rounds, so they're able to defend takedowns and just defend in general and strike in general a lot more. So yeah, look, I think Penne is definitely going to want to take the fight to the ground here, but I don't know if she's going to be able to do that consistently. I think she's probably the weaker girl here. I think Godinez she looks like a bit of a ball. She's shorter, as we've already touched on. So a lot of the time, the shorter fighters, because they weigh the same, the shorter fighters are more stockier. They have more muscle mass. Otherwise, they wouldn't weigh the same, right? So like if you've got a fighter who's got a 5-inch height advantage and they weigh the same, which they have to fight each other, it's a weight class. If the fighter with a height advantage weighs the same as the shorter fighter, then something has to be making up that weight, right? And obviously, what that is either fat, muscle mass, or bone density, right? So usually the shorter fighter is the stronger fighter. Not all the time, of course, case by case, but usually. And I think that's probably the case here. Penne's probably got the better technique in the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu submission grappling, but just in terms of strength, I would say that Godinez is stronger, and she does look stronger as well, just by looking at her. And she does look pretty decently strong in the clinch. So I'm not going to bank on Penne to get takedowns here. And even if she does, we can't assume that she's going to be able to submit Godinez. But I think that is probably her path to victory. On the other hand, we can assume that if the fight stays on the feet, Godinez is going to absolutely box the fuck out of Jessica Penne, right? We can assume that from what we've seen on tape, yeah? And we have to go with what we've seen on tape. So, look, I'm going to go with Lupita Godinez to get the win here. Look, she's minus 300 for a reason, but I don't like laying juice on any MMA, not just women's MMA. There's a bad stigma about women's MMA, but, you know, I read something the other day. I don't know who said this on Twitter, but shout out whoever you was. People were slagging off women's MMA and they're saying armbar from guard happens in women's MMA a lot, you know, more often than men's MMA. But someone said, yeah, but for every woman that gets armbarred from guard, yeah, a male gets flash KO'd, which you don't see in men's MMA. And I actually agree with that. I don't really think there's much difference from low-level women's MMA and men's MMA, to be honest, man. I really think that both what would you call them? Fight divisions, you know, both genders divisions, that there's as much randomness in both. You know, maybe it's a little bit more of women's MMA, but I just don't buy that narrative. But if it is low-level MMA, then there's going to be randomness involved, whether it's men's or women's, right? Went off on a bit of a tangent there, but what I was trying to say was that I don't like laying minus 300s on their UFC debut, right? Unless I see them completely dominate on the regional scene and they're coming up against someone who's almost useless, right? I have seen Godinez kind of completely dominate, but Penne's not useless. She's got the UFC experience and she's not useless. I'm just not going to call her useless, right? I did back Khamzat Chimaev in his debut at minus 300 against John Phillips, but that's completely different, right? I got the same price. Listen to this. I got the same price on Khamzat Chimaev against John Phillips as you're giving me on Lupita Godinez versus Jessica Penne, right? So you can understand why I may back Khamzat Chimaev, but I wouldn't lay the chalk on Godinez here, right? And I'm not doing that. So yeah, I'm not going to lay the chalk. I think a sneaky play may be Godinez inside the distance. As I said, she hits very hard. I've seen her hurt opponents. She hurt Demopoulos badly towards the end of that second round. And throughout the first and second rounds, she was tagging her with ease, hurting her with ease. We have seen Penne stop before. That was by Andrade and Jan Jacek, two of the greatest female fighters of all time. So, you know, it's hard to say that she's going to get stopped by someone on Godinez's level who's not at the level of them fighters here. But I'm just saying, because of the odds, it's like plus 300 or something. I don't completely hate it. She's probably going to get a decision. She is a decision fighter. She's gone to decision in the last 3 or 4 fights. And Penne, you know, she should have enough in her to at least stay alive for the 3 rounds. So, you know, I'm going to predict Godinez by decision. But as I said, if you want to play anything, maybe play her by KO. Or if you want to take a shot on Jessica by sub. But it's one of them ones where it's kind of a shot in the dark, in my opinion. I have seen Godinez put in an armbar. She got out pretty easily. So it's a complete shot in the dark if you're doing that, in my opinion. But, you know, UFC level, maybe you want to look at some props to get some value on this fight. Because as I said, money line, I don't think there's much value on it.